Hello, welcome to the Mayor's office in beautiful downtown Rancho Mirage. Today I am sitting with four very knowledgeable people having to do with the CV Link. And because so much has been said and written about the CV Link and about Rancho Mirage's position, we thought it would be important for you to get it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So what I'd like to do is to make the initial point of letting you know that Rancho Mirage has never opposed a bike trail in the city of Rancho Mirage. We have always supported the concept of a bike trail. It's a real pleasure to introduce you to the team that we have assembled today. I'd like to first introduce Randy Binder, our city manager of about 4 or 5 years now, something like that. Mayor Pro Tem Ted Weil, who has been on the council now for 2 or 3 years. To my left is our new Director of Administrative Services, Isaiah Hagerman, who's also our Finance Director. And I'd like to also introduce you to our esteemed city attorney, one of the finest city attorneys ever, anywhere, is Steve Quintanilla. And each of us will be having things to mention to you and talk to you and discuss. And I'd like to now start with Randy Binder. Randy, what can you tell us that most people don't know about the recreational amenities that Rancho Mirage has provided over the years?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City of Rancho Mirage has provided recreational amenities since incorporation, actually before incorporation. People moved to the City of Rancho Mirage for the recreational and outdoor amenities that the city provides. The first golf course in Rancho Mirage was Thunderbird Golf Course. The second one was Tamarisk Golf Course. Ben Hogan was the first pro at Tamarisk Golf Course. Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus started their rivalry at Thunderbird Country Club. You know, Mr. Mayor, the golf cart was invented for Thunderbird Country Club.
You're kidding.
No, it's true.
See, we learn a lot of things, not only about the CV Link, but about the history of golf carts.
Absolutely. The city has over 30 miles of Class 1 bike lanes in the city and an additional 30 miles of Class 2 bike lanes. Class 1 bike lanes are described or defined as grades separated from the street. Basically, it's an extra wide sidewalk. We have been planning that throughout the community for the last 40 years. The Class 2 bike lanes, which are striped in the street, provide access to all of the city's neighborhoods to the destinations that people want to go. There are bike racks at all of our commercial establishments, all of our resort hotels. And by the way, of the 25 square miles in the city of Rancho Mirage, 8 square miles is in the Santa Rosa Mountains. We have trails, hiking trails that crisscross the Santa Rosa Mountains. It is a Bighorn Sheep Preserve area. It's preserved for open space for future generations. It's in public ownership. People have access to all of the hiking trails in the city of Rancho Mirage. Regarding the city's library, our award-winning library, we had over 300,000 patrons this past year visit the library. Our Writers' Festival is a sellout every year. Our library puts on fantastic lectures, exhibits, and screenings. The Rancho Mirage Art Affair is in its 14th year at the city of Rancho Mirage. We have over 100 artists on exhibit this year. We will be introducing the city's new multi-million-dollar amphitheater. That will be the city's Hollywood Bowl. The residents are going to absolutely love it. The Rancho Mirage Community Park will be open by the end of the year. We have basketball, pickleball, we have tennis, exercise stations, and a brand new children's playground. Soon, we'll start construction on the 3-acre dog park in the northeastern portion of the city. In a few months, we will start construction on a world-class observatory at the city's library. All of these projects are completely funded by the city. The city has never operated in a deficit in the 43 years of incorporation, and we have no debt. The city of Rancho Mirage provides recreational amenities. We're proud of that. That's why people live in this community.
As many of you know, the CV Link has a lead agency. That lead agency is the Coachella Valley Association of Governments. I'd like to ask Steve Quintanilla to explain to us exactly what CVAG, as it's known by, what CVAG is, how it's managed, who runs it, and perhaps even why none of the cities can force the CV Link into a public vote. Steve?
Well, Mr. Mayor, this is a very interesting topic, but I'll start with the Coachella Valley Association of Governments and what that is. The Coachella Valley Association of Governments, which we call CVAG, is actually an independent legal entity. It's a public agency, and it consists of members of each city in the Coachella Valley, plus Blythe and the County of Riverside. So all these cities, including the County of Riverside, have gotten together to set up this legal entity to work on solutions to common problems we have. CVAG was initially started to deal with some of our regional transportation issues, and it has since then morphed to public safety, to massage therapy, to homelessness, and now something like a CV Link project. The way it's set up is that it's set up to require that each of these member agencies contribute a certain amount of money each year, and that the amount of money that's paid by each agency is based on the assessed value of the property in each jurisdiction plus its population. And what that amounts to for the city of Rancho Mirage is approximately $29,000 a year.
Do they have any other sources of income? For example, Measure A funds?
Back in the late 80s, the voters of Riverside County adopted a measure known as Measure A. And Measure A is a 0.5% sales tax that's imposed on any purchase of anything in the County of Riverside. And that tax was extended just a few years ago for an additional 30 years. So it's going to be around here for a long time. And Measure A, the purpose of Measure A was to fund transportation facilities. And it was specifically adopted by the voters to deal with our existing infrastructure and improving our existing infrastructure. So that's why I believe that there's some controversy related to whether or not we can use Measure A for a project such as CV Link, which was not a project or a transportation facility that existed at the time Measure A was approved by the voters and amended by the voters.
Well, speaking of the voters, Steve, you've heard me say, and I've heard others say, in fact, I've heard you say, that because of the structure of CVAG, the 9 cities, excluding Blythe as a 10th city, that the 9 cities comprising the Coachella Valley contingent of cities does not have the authority, collectively or individually, to require CVAG to put on the ballot for a broad public vote throughout the Coachella Valley the subject of whether or not people want to spend or want CVAG to spend $100 million constructing the CV Link. So it would eventually, one way or another, be up to the executive committee, which is comprised of one person from each of the cities. That executive committee would have to require the matter go to a vote.
That's correct. That's correct.
And
It would require a majority vote of the executive committee, which also includes not only the city councils, but also a representative from the county.
On that point, let me make the point that CVAG has 9 Coachella Valley cities. It also has the county, and from the county's perspective, all 5 county supervisors are on the board of directors of CVAG. So CVAG has 5 members of the county and 9, or for a total of 14 total members.
Plus the city of Blythe.
Yeah, but the city of Blythe arguably wouldn't have a vote on
CV.
on CV Link or anything having to do with our Measure A funds, because they have their own Measure A funds.
That's correct.
So they wouldn't, I would suspect, they would not be able to vote for both. Well, thank you very much, Steve. CVAG is governed by an executive committee that is comprised of 9 members, 1 each from each of the cities of the Coachella Valley. Also on the executive committee of CVAG are all 5 supervisors from the Board of Supervisors of Riverside County. So CVAG has a total membership of 14 members who can deal with issues having to do with Measure A funding, but there's an additional member, Blythe, for matters that do not affect Measure A. To pass anything, for example, to allow the public to vote on whether or not we're going to have a CV Link, you would have to have a majority vote of the executive committee, which would be 9 and 5 is 14. You'd need 8 people to support it, to have a public vote. And unfortunately, Rancho Mirage, which very much supports a public vote of the matter, we know that at CVAG and the executive committee, we do not have the votes for a public referendum on this matter. Those of you who have been following all of this drama in the local newspapers and through reports from me and radio and TV, you will hear the other side say, yeah, but Rancho Mirage and Hobart were first in favor of the CV link, and now they're not, as though that is some evil to have changed your minds when you've learned circumstances that did not come to your attention initially. The two reasons, the primary reasons that Rancho Mirage is dissatisfied with the situation is we assumed, wrongly, that we would be working with CVAG to determine the appropriate route through the city of Rancho Mirage. Every other city has had something worked out to where they're all pleased and satisfied, except for Indian Wells. Indian Wells and Rancho Mirage have something similar that has caused a problem for us. It turns out that CVAG, for CV Link, wants to have that path run down Highway 111 in Rancho Mirage. We have said absolutely no, you cannot go down Highway 111 in Rancho Mirage because it interferes with too many businesses, the entrance to too many residents, and it would just cause discombobulation of traffic and business enterprise, and it just doesn't work. Of course, no other city either has it on Highway 111 except for Indian Wells, and they're saying no, just like we are. So that's the first problem, is we figured that the route would get accepted. We gave them a route to use down at Ramon Road. They can use Ramon Road and make sure that the route continues from one end of the valley to the other. The other reason has to do with economics, and that is that the original version of the CV Link told all of the cities in the valley that there would be no local funds used to pay for operations and maintenance. Now, how can you trust me that that's what it says? You won't have to, because what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a copy of the March 2015 Master Plan. Page 15, in bold letters, under the subject Operations and Maintenance at the top. It says, quote, operations and maintenance will not require local funding. It wasn't until March 30th when Tom Kirk, the executive director of CVAG, came to City Hall and told a group of us, small group, that that promise, that commitment, that it was published in March of this year, and keep in mind, he is talking to us on March 30th of this year. He's saying that's out. Now the entire O&M, operations and maintenance funding, is going to come from the cities and from what we can take from Measure A funds. So that was a major change of where we were with them. The operations and maintenance figure that is right here on the same page, that the project's designers and creators and experts have all agreed to at that point in time, it was that the total first year of operations would cost $1,616,900. That was the first year of O&M, operations and maintenance. They project that those figures will increase at 2% per annum for inflationary causes. So for the first year, these 9 cities and the county were to have to come up with $1.6 million to round it, $1.6 million. That is so far away from what we were originally told. The city of Rancho Mirage put the issue on the April 2nd council agenda. The council voted 5-0 to oppose that program and plan, and we've been opposing it ever since. So the reasons we once were for it and now are against it is because we are getting a very raw deal from them with respect to the route. They want to come down Highway 111. They are bound and determined to come down Highway 111, and we are bound and determined that they will not. And secondly, the economics changed from no local funding, as promised in the master plan, to 100% local funding, because even Measure A funds are local funds. With respect to the figure that I mentioned a moment ago, that 1.6 million in operations and maintenance costs, I'd like to ask our Director of Administrative Services, Isaiah Hagerman, to discuss with you why that number may not be all that reliable. Isaiah?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely. Anytime we're doing a project like this, where you are bringing a new amenity to a community, one of the primary concerns is always the operations and maintenance. You have to solve that first before you decide to build something. The one-time commitment to build something is said and done in a short period of time. However, being on the hook for the ongoing operations and maintenance, as long as that facility exists, is always the larger financial commitment for a city or a government agency. So in this case, what we found out in the March 2015 master plan was the original estimate for the first year of full operations of the CV Link was at approximately $1.6 million. Well, that equates to $33,600 per mile. Rancho Mirage, with the current route, we have about 4.7 miles of CV Link in our city. So how CVAG tried to fix this O&M issue is they tried to tie the funding of this 1.6 million to tourism and the growth in tourism, and there was a TOT formula that was proposed by CVAG. Now, for Rancho Mirage, we were strongly opposed to this TOT formula because of the makeup of our community and how we fund our services. Rancho Mirage is a low property tax city. We rely heavily on TOT and sales tax. In fact, 50% of our money comes from TOT and sales tax. So the formula that was being proposed by CVAG had 5 cities paying for 90% of that 1.6 million of operations and maintenance for the CV Link. Inherently, it was unfair to communities like ours that rely heavily on the tourism industry. An easy example of when you look at that plan that was presented by CVAG is the city of Coachella had 5.5 miles of CV Link, which was about 11% of the total trail. Yet the city of Coachella has 0 TOT. So under that formula, the city of Coachella with their 5.5 miles was paying nothing for operations and maintenance. Why? Because the high producing TOT cities like the city of Rancho Mirage were covering their share. So Rancho Mirage was getting a disproportionate share of the O&M.
Isaiah, with respect to the TOT, the transient occupancy taxes, bed taxes, under the plan that was being offered by CVAG, under the plan that you've just described, am I correct that whatever that number turns out to be for Rancho Mirage in the first year, and if you took 4.7 times the $33,000 average per mile, that would be how much the city would have to pay out of its general fund to the CV Link group. And that would be increased by at least 2% for each of the next 75 years that they have as a lifetime estimate for this project. So the city of Rancho Mirage at this point in time, before signing on to an agreement that we would pay such a high amount of money for this project, this is something that I would assume has to be considered extremely carefully at this stage, because once we've signed that contract, we're bound forever, virtually, to it. Am I right about that? And what permutations of that concept can you add to it?
You're absolutely correct, Mayor. In signing on to that plan, we would be committed to it as long as the CV link existed. And so the ongoing commitment year after year coming out of our general fund is a significant item for our city. In general, every city across the valley right now, our expenses are growing faster than our revenues. And the primary driver of that is our public safety costs. In the last 2 years alone, our sheriff costs have increased over 15%. For the city of Rancho Mirage, we estimate that's about $500,000 a year that we're planning on increases in our public safety costs, so our police and fire. So what's happening is our general funds are really being squeezed by the public safety costs. So when we do nothing to the level of service for our public safety, we're still going to get about a $500,000 increase every year, which really means our revenue needs to keep pace with that. And it's very difficult right now for every city in the valley to keep up with the public safety costs. And so anything that we're going to commit out of our general fund has to be desperately needed by our community.
Thank you, Isaiah. I see it the same way. And to commit your city to 75 years of such an increasing high annual amount is a dangerous thing, it would seem to me. And that's the reason that we're so concerned here in Rancho Mirage.
Yeah, and to the public safety component, one of the shortfalls of the current operations and maintenance plan for the CV Link is they don't address the public safety costs. So right now, that 1.6 million in annual operations and maintenance doesn't consider public safety. Well, who pays for public safety? It's your cities. CVAG doesn't pay for public safety. And so we know there will be an impact on our public safety as a result of the CV Link. We see it right now with the trails that we do have. The other big issue with the CV Link is this isn't a normal roadway. If it was a normal roadway, our safety vehicles could access them like any other roadway. When we respond to a medical call, the typical response is a fire truck and an ambulance. Those are very heavy vehicles. Those are very wide vehicles. And right now, the access to the CV Link for our safety vehicles, if somebody gets hurt on that trail, it has not been answered. We don't know. What we do know is there will be some level of impact on our public safety as a result of the CV Link just inherently responding to injuries or emergencies on the trail. There will also be a safety or enforcement component that our sheriffs will have to carry out. There's going to be rules for this trail and they're going to have to be enforced.
Steve, I'd like to ask you a question concerning whether or not Measure A funds can be used for operations and maintenance, or whether they cannot be used for operations and maintenance.
Well, whether they can use it for operation there's a very simple answer, and that answer is no. When Measure A was presented to the voters, in the description of Measure A and the explanation of what Measure A was all about, there was nothing in there that indicated to the voters that it could be used for operations.
Okay, with respect to maintenance, there is a clause in there having to do with preventative maintenance. What would allow CVAG to, what would allow them to go into Measure A funds that the county holds and use some of those funds for preventative maintenance?
Correct. Yeah, in Measure A, in the ballot material with Measure A, there was included an ordinance. And the ordinance is really what Measure A is all about. In the ordinance, it explains the purpose of Measure A, which was clearly to be used for maintenance, improvement, and of our existing roadways. Not building new roadways, but maintaining and improving our existing roadways. There's a lot of discussion in the Measure A ballot material that talks about our deteriorating roadways throughout Riverside County, and that there was a need to create this source of funding to pay for the maintenance and preventative maintenance of these roadways. There is a transportation plan that's actually included with Measure A, the Measure A ordinance. And in that transportation plan, it clearly spells out that 50% of the Measure A funds can be used for preventative maintenance of our road arterials in the Coachella Valley, only if a majority of the Coachella Valley local governments give approval. And what that means is that it means that each city council of each city in the Coachella Valley has to take a vote, a majority vote, to authorize CVAG to use Measure A for preventative maintenance.
If we go back a step, for CVAG to be able to use Measure A for preventative maintenance, they would have to first build a project that qualifies for Measure A funds, which means, I don't know that we've talked about it much, but this TIPS list, which you and I are familiar with and everybody in this room is familiar with, this requires that any project that is to receive Measure A funds in the Coachella Valley, regional Measure A funds coming from CVAG, means that it has to be on this list. This list contains a list of, right now, about 240 separate road conditions, all of which are dangerous, hazardous, and expensive. Those 240 total about $3 billion worth of expenditures. So for them to be able to spend money on CV Link, they would have to take this brand new project and somehow change the rules, allow it to get on this list of 240 disabled roads, broken roads, and crumbling roads. Literally, that's not me talking, that's what these roads are. And how they would do that, how they would be able to say, we're going to let a brand new project become one of the 240, and we're going to move it up to the top 10% so that it can receive money to build part of the CV Link. Other than just flatly changing the rules, they couldn't do that, could they?
Well, with all due respect to the attorneys who rendered an opinion for CVAG that informed CVAG that they had the right to use Measure A funds to construct a new road, I have to respectfully disagree with that. Because again, when the voters were presented with Measure A, they were told through the ballot material that the purpose of Measure A, the sole purpose of Measure A, was to improve and maintain our existing roadways because of the crumbling conditions our roadways were in and because of the increased traffic that was going to further deteriorate our roadways. There is nothing in Measure A or in the ordinance that implements Measure A or in the transportation improvement plan that was adopted by the voters that indicates to me that Measure A can be used to construct new roadways.
Well, you raise a good point that I'd like to just mention. This is Measure A. This is the ordinance. The first paragraph is the preamble. The voters saw all of this. It was all available to the voters. If they didn't read anything else, they at least read the preamble. And in the preamble, to use one of the words you just used, it said, the transportation system in Riverside County is rapidly deteriorating. Maintenance and repairs of existing roadways and improvements to relieve congestion cannot be accomplished with available funds. Without additional funds, the system will bog down and pavement will crumble into permanent disrepair. This made it clear that the money was to be used for repairing our roadways, not giving it off to some bicycle, electric vehicle, jogger pathway. And it's disturbing to see that this fact has not received a whole lot of public attention. In fact, the only attention that the public has received has been coming from Rancho Mirage. It's been our efforts that has brought that out. And there's one other section in here that you were just referring to, and that is, it says, I'm talking about the Coachella Valley's use of Measure A funds. They tell us in this ordinance what Measure A funds can be used for. And this is what it says. Our regional Measure A revenues, quote, will be used for state highways and regional road improvements, end quote. It does say preventative maintenance of these Measure A funded arterials will be allowed if a majority of the Coachella Valley local governments give approval. And that pretty much is the point of law that you've explained and made clear. You made appropriate apologies to a law firm that disagreed with your law firm as to some of the meanings here. It's important to know that in June or so, the city of Rancho Mirage placed on the CVAG ballot, came to a vote. We had put it there. And what we had asked was that before CVAG authorized the expenditure of any Measure A funds, that we get a legal opinion from a major law firm that is not in the valley, not within our spheres of influence, as to whether or not it was legal to use Measure A funds on a brand new project instead of on the 240 disabled roads and bridges and intersections. That came to a vote, and only 2 cities, Rancho Mirage and Indian Wells, voted to get an independent legal opinion. And instead, the legal opinion that CVAG is acting under is a legal opinion given by their attorneys. And it's like us saying, well, you're not going to be biased because even though you're our attorneys, we recognize there is an inherent possibility of bias, at least in the minds of the independent public. So that's why we said, let's have an independent law firm give us an opinion that we can rely on. And it was voted down, something like 10-2. Very distressing. Thank you very much, Steve, for your insights. We appreciate them very much. I'd like to ask you, Randy, if I could, why is it that Rancho Mirage is having so much difficulty getting its route issues squared away with CVAG compared to other cities?
Well, Mr. Mayor, in Rancho Mirage, in the other cities, the whitewater wash is vacant. It's empty and it's a no man's land. It's easy to build the CV link on the berms or in the bottom of the wash and traverse it from Palm Springs to Coachella. But in Rancho Mirage, we have several long-established country clubs. We have the Thunderbird Country Club and the Rancho Las Palmas Country Club. Neither of those are available for the CV link to go through them. The CVAG also wanted to use the Butler Abrams Trail, which is a rural rustic trail that goes along the Whitewater Channel adjacent to the Peterson Road neighborhood and the Morningside Country Club between Frank Sinatra and Country Club Drive. The City Council made it clear that that was not available to pave over and change the rural and rustic nature of that trail. That trail's been in existence for 50 years. Primarily as an equestrian trail to start with. If you go there now in the morning, you'll see people with dogs, on mountain bikes. It's used by the community. We don't want that character to change. That's why people are in the city of Rancho Mirage. To circumvent the concept that we don't want the country clubs compromised for privacy and safety, CVAG decided that they were going to go down Highway 111 instead. So we've spent lots of money widening Highway 111 to 6 lanes, 3 lanes in each direction, increasing the capacity of the roadway, making it enjoyable for people to travel throughout Rancho Mirage. The CV link would have to go across crosswalks, severely compromising the capacity of the roadway and creating safety problems. The advocates say that this will address safety problems in the city. I say it will make safety more problematic. The CV link in the landscape parkway will decimate landscaping up and down Highway 111. It will compromise the business activity in Highway 111 that we work so hard, that we talked about earlier. The city's lifeblood is bed tax and retail sales tax. We've worked hard to create the economic engine that so successfully makes this city go. If you take the CV link, put it in front of our major country clubs, put it across Station 50, which is our main fire station on Highway 111, use the library as a stopping point. One of the stopping points in the CV Link Master Plan was the city's library. They were going to have a staging area, a parking area, a charging station, and use the library's bathrooms as a pit stop for people using the CV Link. That's not what we planned the library for. That's not what the citizens of this city expect their elected officials and appointed officials to protect. Going further down Highway 111 through Rancho Mirage, the business community would be severely impacted by the CV Link. Every driveway that it would cross would compromise safety and capacity of the city.
Well, I gather that if you think of yourself going in or coming out of a business establishment, you're in your car, you have to worry about traffic on Highway 111 going both ways. You decide which way you're going to go. And not only that, you now have to start being concerned about pedestrians, ADA-approved vehicles, bicycles, just adding a major component of confusion coming from traffic that just made it impossible. Our residents, as we all know, we're hearing from them, our residents were extremely concerned about the impact it would have on them being able to get into their home sites and into our businesses. Thank you very much for that. One of the things that we commonly hear, Randy, is a reference to the CV Link as being a path or a trail, which makes it sound bucolic and serene. However, it's true, is it not, that there are also a major component of this CV Link includes neighborhood electric vehicles or low-speed electric vehicles? And if so, could you tell us a little bit about how that makes this path different from what most people envision when they think of a jogging and biking trail?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. The residents of the city need to understand that neighborhood electric vehicles are not a toy or a golf cart. These are 2,000 and 3,000 pound vehicles. You have to be a licensed driver to use them. They have to have seat belts. They go up to 25 miles per hour. I feel that putting that adjacent to or on the same path as bicycles and pedestrians presents a significant public safety issue. Neighborhood electric vehicles, in my mind, the technology has been around for, let's say, 10, 15 years or more. We have only 440 neighborhood electric vehicles that are registered in the Coachella Valley. In my mind, the electric vehicle technology has leapfrogged over neighborhood electric vehicles. You can now buy a Nissan Leaf or a Prius or a Ford C-Max for about the same price that you could buy a neighborhood electric vehicle, but those are real cars. Those could go on freeways. They could go much longer distances. I don't think people will be buying those and using those as part of the CV Link. But the CV Link is being funded by grants to encourage neighborhood electric vehicles. One of the things that the CV Link has to do is support these vehicles, so it's going to be extra wide. You might have 14 feet of concrete, another separation path, and another 6 feet of soft material for walking and biking. That significantly increases the cost of the CV Link. Mr. Mayor, the City of Rancho Mirage has planned for golf cart utopia in the city. In the past, we have, and presently, we have miles and miles of cart paths in Rancho Mirage. We planned for our neighborhoods to be able to access shopping centers, resort hotels, all of the amenities that the city provides. That infrastructure is all installed already, but you don't see golf carts driving up and down our major roads or on the Class 1 meandering bike paths. It just hasn't happened. One of the projects I worked on was the Albertson Shopping Center at the corner of Country Club in Monterey. The developer striped parking spaces for golf carts. Golf carts are allowed to drive on the sidewalks, the 8-foot wide meandering sidewalks, to that shopping center. 3 months after it opened, I got a call from the manager. These parking spaces are never used, Randy. Can we restripe them for regular vehicles? I can tell you that the idea of people using golf carts to drive around this community, given the low density land use pattern that we've so successfully established, is just not going to happen. If it's not happening with golf carts, it's certainly not going to happen with larger neighborhood electric vehicles.
Ted, you, like me, like many people, at an earlier point in time, supported the concept of the CV Link. What was your thinking then, and what caused you to reverse your position?
Well, as you know, Mr. Mayor, the Desert Sun has quoted me several times now because I had put on my website enthusiastically the idea that this was a revolutionary new mode of transportation. That was the quote that they used, and they were accurate. And that's the way I felt. But unfortunately, the trite expression of the devil in the details did come out. And the details were far different than a bike path or a jogging trail. It morphed into a parkway as a result of the introduction of electric vehicles. That changed the whole mode. I'm on the CVAG Transportation Committee. I'm also the representative of the city on the Riverside County Transportation Commission. So I have some background regarding the subject. At one of the commission meetings, when this was discussed, and for the first time, operations and maintenance reared its head, I made a comment that that is the elephant in the room. That is the unknown expense. The executive director immediately said, that's not the elephant in the room. That's the mouse in the room. Well, we're talking about a mouse that eats $1.6 million. That's a pretty heavy mouse. That was undisclosed. The other thing that I commented about, being a developer, is I've never started a development without knowing what it's going to cost me. The executive director said it's a joke to think about this 2 years before construction starts. I must tell you that if I approached my projects that way, they would have been out of business. I would have been bankrupt. So I totally disagreed. I changed my view. And as far as I'm concerned, our fiduciary responsibility now is to make certain that our residents don't have this undue expense.
Do you talk much with the residents, and how do they feel about the idea of burdening the city economically for the next 75 years before we have any absolute guarantee or assurance of what it's going to cost not only the city in this decade, but in the city for the coming 7 more decades?
Well, of course, they're absolutely frightened about it. They could not feel stronger about not proceeding with an unknown expense, with an unknown cost. Many of our residents are here. They're at an age that they're enjoying their lifestyle. And in addition to that, they plan on passing on these residents to their children and grandchildren. They don't want to place a burden, an unknown financial burden upon them. So, of course, they're very much afraid and don't want to be subject to this unknown expense.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for the time we've spent and the points that each person has made to this conversation and this discussion. To summarize, I would say that Rancho Mirage insists on protecting the residents from expenses and a future residents with a bill that will not come due for 75 years. We're very serious about that subject. We have serious problems with the CV Link. We're not happy with the route projections that they wish to take, and we've told them you can't come down Highway 111. If you want to be in Rancho Mirage, you have to use Ramon Road. We're not happy with the financial instability, the lack of information and detail with respect to the future operations and maintenance. Suppose we all agree, all cities agree to join the band, so to speak. But what happens if one city changes its mind 1 year or 10 or 50 years from now? changes his mind and said, we can't afford to be on there anymore, so we're out. What's the plan for picking up that loss of income? The answer is they haven't got the slightest idea how they'll deal with that. In 24 years, Measure A funds will run out. The extension was to the year 2039. When that time comes, if money is being taken from Measure A to reduce the operations and maintenance expenses, who's going to make up that? They're talking about $600,000 is the smallest figure I've heard that they want to take annually, increasing it, of course, at 2%. They want to take $600,000 of Measure A funds. What happens if that funding stops in 2039? Which cities are going to be responsible for picking up that deficit? They haven't got the slightest idea. They've never even addressed the subject. Why isn't there a vote? Why hasn't CVAG allowed the public to express themselves on this major issue? A $100 million project that's being decided by essentially 8 or 10 people. That's all it is. A majority vote of the executive committee. They are deciding for the entire 300,000 to 400,000 people of the valley that there will be a CV link. But we won't give the voters a chance to say maybe they should veto our decision. Rancho Mirage is attempting to give them motivation to let this matter go to the ballot. We have put on our April 2016 election ballot certain questions related to the CV link. Are you for it? Do you favor taking Measure A funds away from the road projects that need it and allow it to reduce the operations and maintenance expenses? Other questions like that. Highway 111, all of that. We're putting to our residents the matter to a vote. It'll be an advisory vote because we can't force CVAG as long as the executive committee majority, as long as they've got 7 or so votes, 8, whatever, we can't force them to let the voters speak for themselves. So we'll do what we can and we will publicize the results wide and far. Thank you for spending your time with us. I want to thank Steve Quintanilla. I'd like to thank Isaiah Hagerman. I'd like to thank Mayor Pro Tem Weil and our great Randy Binder, our city manager. We've done this in the hopes that we can offset misleading information that you've been getting and will probably continue to get. Have a good day. We'll see you soon.